My last two videos, Magic and Kitsch and Magic and Evil, drew some comparisons between magical culture and artistic culture, and someone in response told me that Alan Moore equates the two, magic and art, and in many ways I agree. There's a lot of overlap, a lot in common, and yet I still find it interesting to explore the difference between them as I see it. Now, as to the similarities, I quite often, when I'm trying to explain things to people who have absolutely no understanding of how to deal with magic, in terms of comparisons with art, because there are similarities. My favourite example is, when someone says something like, "Oh, tarot reading is absolute nonsense because you can't say these symbols go back to time immemorial. History shows they didn't appear before the Middle Ages." Well, I say, well, also, history tells us that Shakespeare's plays, historical plays, are pretty misleading if you take them as historical fact. But does that mean we should ban them from the education process? No, because the value of Shakespeare's plays is not in their historical accuracy, but what they tell us about humanity and society. And in the same way, the value of a tarot reading is not what the history of the tarot pack is, but what it tells you about yourself and your role in society. So in this way, I do draw comparisons between them. But in the Four Glasses of Water movie, I also pointed out some differences. And one is that in art and religion, what a thing is more important than what a thing does, whereas in science and magic, what a thing does is more important than what it actually is. That's not a terribly important distinction. I think there are some more important differences. For a start, I see art as going beyond magic in a similar way that I see magic as going beyond science. Magic is what we tend to turn to when science comes across problems that are too complex and too human to handle properly, and then we turn to magic. And similarly, I think that although art, a work of art and a work of magic can start from something very similar, it could be an inner impulse, a dissatisfaction that needs to be resolved. And you could do that as an act of magic. This is my intention to, as it were, work with this problem. Or it could be something more outer, you simply have a sponsor who demands another picture. And so you satisfy that demand by doing some art. Now, what you actually do depends on what your medium is. It might be musical, creating a piece of music. It might be a performance, a ritual. It might be painting an image. It might be constructing a talisman. Whatever your medium is, the magician and the artist are doing something very similar. They're satisfying a need by doing something which isn't an obvious solution to it. But I think the difference comes when, having completed that, if you hear a voice over your shoulder saying, "Wow, that's amazing," and you realize the personal act you've performed is seen as meaningful by a third person that wasn't involved in it, then it's moving towards acceptance as art. As more and more people say, "Wow, this is amazing," it ceases to be such a personal thing and becomes more and more public property, to the point where your whole tribe says this is a work of art, or even in a great work of art, all of society recognizes it as an iconic piece. And then it's moving towards a religious culture. It's becoming less and less the property of the artist and more the property of humanity as a whole, or equally the property of, as it were, the priesthood, the experts, the academicians and the collectors of art who say this is art and this is not. And so that is what I mean when I say that sort of religion goes beyond art, because the religious work is seen as not actually belonging to the artist at all. It is an inspiration from God or the universe that comes down, and so on. That is the basis of a religion. So that's what I mean by saying that art goes beyond magic. And that also relates to the example I gave in 4 glasses of water, where whereas the magician can turn a glass of water into healing water, the artist can actually turn it into an oak tree. I can't think many magicians would try that. Now I know that the way the artist does that is not really satisfying from a magical point of view, and yet it is a very real transformation, and it is one that, if you're a conceptual artist, could sell for a lot of money, can make your name. So it's not insignificant, that transformation. It goes way beyond anything a magician would attempt. So that simply is how I see the similarities and differences between these two cultures. It's my own view.